Another draft physics video presentation. Guess I'll do some crappy comments. Shouldn't bother. They're beneath me. Yeah. People just forget about it. You're just too stupid. Alright, so anyway, first off, Mr. Rebuttal. GR and QM are testable. That's sort of part of this argument. You're claiming my theory's unfalsifiable, yet my theory contains actual things that have actual properties and actual fingerprints. You know, they're going to leave, they're going to cause other effects. They're not magical elements that get to hide like angels or gremlins. They don't have any special properties that make them invisible. Well, your argument is for things that are completely intangible, untestable, and in no way, they don't have any substance. There's no energy in your QM or your quantum mechanics. Your quantum mechanics or your bent space. I've already pointed that out. You have no explanation for where the energy comes from to move one thing into another thing. No explanation whatsoever for what it is or how it manifests. Anyway, because if they are false, you could disprove them with experiments. So again, see, this is part of their lies, right? They're claiming that you've proved them with an experiment, where, again, the argument can be made so easily that your proof absolutely stinks. Again, this Eddington experiment that you've never repeated, you haven't even tried it with advanced technology. You haven't tried it with even 100-year-old technology. No one's even tried to duplicate it with technology equal to what Eddington used, let alone superior technology. And even though it's right there to grab as a simple experiment, takes a tiny bit of effort, a couple of hours worth of photographing. That's it, and you're done. You can, modify a satellite to do it with no trouble at all. It hasn't been done. One of the most critical proofs in your physics. And yet you'll claim you've done your job. You've presented all the evidence that needs to be presented to convict, to decide the case, to say it's beyond a reasonable doubt. And you haven't done any of that. None. Again, proving the existence of a relationship between velocity, and breaking clocks doesn't prove that there's a time dimension. So again, you haven't proven any of this stuff. You haven't presented anything, any weight of evidence whatsoever. It's a disgusting fraud for you to claim you've done your job as a prosecutor of the truth. You could disprove them with experiments. Well, I'm arguing, yes, you could disprove them by merely attempting to do your proof. That is, to do what you claim you have done, because you'll find out that Einstein's arbitrary increase in the amount of bending that light would encounter isn't true, and that light doesn't bend at all, in fact. Okay, your theory is not, because if it is false, the results of all experiments one could do would turn out the same. Again, just to say, the same what? The same fake experiments you've done. The point is we only have so much experimental data, and so you're sitting there telling me that it doesn't matter that your math doesn't predict, like the two-slit experiment. It doesn't predict both the patterns. Your theory doesn't explain the two patterns. Your theory doesn't explain why the pattern isn't accurate, in the sense that in photons it's clearly bands of light, and in electrons it's clearly a gradual pattern. Your math says it should be gradual, and it's not. Even for Newton's rings, you have no explanation. They're clearly, decidedly, just on or off. The little black lines are clearly black, and the on parts are continuously on. It's the same intensity throughout the band of light. So you don't have any math that predicts any of that or explains any of that. It's so imperfect, and yet you're claiming it's the most perfect predictive math in the history of mankind, when it's not. I mean, your exaggerations are so obvious. And again, if my theory was wrong, then you could prove it wrong by showing me some bent light. Do the Eddington experiment in a straight-up, real manner, and prove your case. Or show that any of those gravitational lensing images have anything to do with mathematical reality. Show me how the wrong shaped lens can make a real thick Einstein ring. Go ahead, show me how it makes any sense mathematically, because it doesn't. Your whole physics is a fraud. You're just living on propaganda. There's nothing else to it. And all I can do is make the rational arguments. I can explain to you that photons aren't waves. I can explain to you how they're broken and then reconstructed, and that explains their existence in one place versus another place. I can explain that the energy's still there. I can tell you if you do the real experiment, that is, if you do the radar experiment in some sort of serious way, where you're just measuring the amount of energy that hits a location, heat, you'll see that there's energy where those little dark spots are. Okay, there's really energy hitting there. It's just not in a form that you're going to see as a photon. So anyway, so it's just a lie that it's untestable. And again, but the problem is there's only one set of evidence. And all you're saying is which theory meets that evidence with the most rational explanation. You have a silly God theory full of a bunch of invisible mechanisms with unknown properties that just poof into existence. And I have a theory, a mechanical theory, that explains it pretty much as just two kinds of force, two kinds of matter, and two kinds of interactions. All right. And you haven't shown the experiments that my theory fails to explain. Okay, so Superior Mind says, I don't think you're getting it. Where does GR mechanically explain anything? Clearly, it explains nothing. It's just a way of a silly way. Again, there's nothing rational about it. We know, Newton figured out that there's an inverse square law. The inverse square law has a huge rational connection to the idea of a radial force. That's what a radial force will do. It'll exactly create the inverse square law. If the rays are diverging in two dimensions, they'll create the inverse square law, because the square here is going to be 4 times bigger than the square here. It's just basic geometry, and that means the force is going to fall off by the r squared rule. Now, you take that fact that Newton discovered and convert it into something that makes that arbitrary, where the source of it is from. It makes, you're just establishing, well, there's that rule, but it has nothing to do with that fact, because I'm just going to say it's an infinite well. And nothing ever has to, there's no end to it. It just goes for infinity. You're the one that creates these idiotic notions that everything has an endless supply of something. But this is it. Okay, r squared looks like that on a chart. Okay, so what? How does that explain why there's an r squared? You're just drawing the line and saying, there, I drew the line. I can make its reciprocal over here, and I can create this idiotic notion that something's bent. That there's a bend in something. It's not explaining the force. It's not explaining the mechanism, where obviously the thing radiating or reflecting, right? That certainly is explained. Okay, if something goes in and something comes off the surface reflecting, it's perfectly understandable that a pressure coming from the outside can reflect off of something and look like a pressure from the inside. It's completely understandable, unlike your crap. Let's see, it's merely a set of math tricks. I wouldn't even call it math tricks. It's irrational. This is two-dimensional space, this bent thing. How do I convert that two-dimensional drawing into, here's a spherical object, in the universe? How do I convert that? Well, the only way to convert it is to understand it as, yes, Mach gravity. As a force coming in. That's how it's taught. Again, I can keep saying, what, you want me to just play the Susskind video again? Where he's teaching it as fluid dynamics? Calling it an anti-divergence. Because he's got to, he doesn't want to say convergence. Because convergence means, oh yeah, well, I'd have to account for where it all goes. So I can't really say convergence, but then I have to really turn every little piece of matter into some magic drain where something drains into it, and I never have to explain where this came from, and I don't have to explain where it's going. I mean, you know, you've got it's so empty as an explanation of why. All right. I'm showing the matrix of gravitational forces, yet people proclaim no force is responsible. Nothing itself does it. The bent nothing is absurd. Well, again, the bent idea is just silly because we know there's a three-dimensional universe. We know the three exist. Okay, you fairies think there's a fourth and a fifth and whatever because that's just your made up. Again, you're just looking to make up fake realities. But you know there's three, and you know there's no fabric to bend in 3 dimensions. So all you have is the going in part. Ugh, it's disgusting. QM isn't much more than probability calculations based on known outcomes. It's probability. What it's doing is saying, look, we know these are very dense events, okay, that lots of stuff is happening. So QM has the huge cheat of this pretense that because it's a bunch of little events, you know, a bunch of little things, a bunch of things happening on a tiny scale, billions and trillions of them in one little tiny pinhead. And so we'll just recognize everything as a group, you know, so everything's a clump of a group of something. And then, yes, we can make calculations about the tendencies of behavior. But that's all it's doing. It's just pretending there are no individuals. We're just going to, we're going to treat the whole, the line of soldiers as some sort of wave front. And we're going to pretend that line of soldiers is some sort of integral one thing, when it's not. It's a bunch of individual soldiers, and each individual soldier has to do his little stab and thrust thing. He has to do his little bit for it to work. But there's little bits making the thing. The thing isn't some kind of stupid, jerky, idiotic wave. And yes, and a bunch of different, sending a bunch of things out over time. I can send a soldier that way, and I send one that way, and that way, and that way, and that way. And I can have a timed equation and say, over time, what's going to happen? Well, yes, something's going to get hit over here, something's going to get hit over there, something's going to get hit over there. So if I give myself a large enough time scale, then I can turn a bunch of individual events into one event. But it just wasn't one event. QM isn't much more than probability calculations based on known outcomes. The fairy story explanations that accompany them break logic in too many ways. They break what's like credibility, credulity, whatever. It's just UFOs talk. You know, it's just these people are just saying, here's my extraordinary explanation. Nothing with no properties, no attributes, no mechanism makes something happen. It affects the nothing, tells the something what to do. That's all it's saying clearly. There's nothing more to it. The evidence and math are not consistent with the explanation. So let's say there's no great math here. There's Einstein's field equations, which are just, in a sense, using time dilation, using a time factor that doesn't really exist in the reality, and using it as a way of duplicating an argument I would make that everything, all that extra crap that Einstein piled on to explain the precession of Mercury, right? This little thing. All it comes down to is by applying that to the sun, you end up precessing the sun. Okay, and so it's the sun's precession that's causing the precession of Mercury. And the fact is that precession can't be felt by the Earth, but there is a slight effect. And that's all there is. There's just the precession of the center of the sun's gravity. And the fact that Newton didn't account for that because Newton assumed it to be so frickin' irrelevant in magnitude by comparison to the size and distances involved, that any movement, any amount you move the center of the sun's gravity because of the gravity effect of Jupiter and Saturn and the Earth and Venus would be so minuscule it wouldn't be worth accounting for. But clearly it is worth accounting for because it's causing Mercury to precess. And the closer you are, the more likely you're going to be affected by that procession. So it's perfectly consistent to say there's the rational explanation. Time, there's no time frame that's causing it. All right. The evidence and math are not consistent with the explanations. Well, there's certainly not. There's nothing that makes the idiotic photons are twice as bent by gravity crap in any way reasonable as a statement without very strong evidence. And they have, instead of very strong evidence, they have just about as bad an evidence as you can get, in the sense that they write a New York headline saying Einstein right, even though it says right in the guy's journal, I wouldn't stake my life on these results. So ignore what the guy who did the experiment actually said when he was being honest. The real mechanical explanations based on the evidence work conceptually and in a simulation mostly just need to refine some of the details. Well, the idea of high and low pressure works as an explanation for how the universe functions. That's a fact. The energy goes from being outside to being inside, and that's what's happening in the universe. It's just trapping it. Period. Trap theory works. Momentum being trapped by matter works as a theory of how energy moves through the universe. Okay. Oh, you reject the explanation of general relativity because you find it unintuitive. So they just keep using this stupid claim of intuition. What is your intuition based on? It's basically common sense, in the sense that you live a life and you write shorthand for realities, little things that what goes up comes down kind of notions. And they're saying that those intuitions, okay, those things that have been proven 7 million times right to your own face, are somehow suspect. Well, in the first place, they're not really suspect. Most of them can't be assailed because your experience is long enough to have those intuitions. Like, maybe a 16-year-old doesn't have very good intuition about women, because he hasn't been, deferred enough times to realize, it's a slaughterhouse in the end. Whatever those little things you can say about what life experience can teach you. But that's not what's being argued here. You can play this game that somehow, we're taking physics too trivially and just saying everything should be just way simpler than you want it to be. You're making it much more complicated than it needs to be, and that's the truth of it. It isn't that complicated. It's just energy moving through systems, and you're the one turning that into magic, and you're the one pretending you can have no accounting for the energy and then say you have some idea of energy conservation. I'm respecting the intuition of energy conservation. Well, no, you're not. Plainly not. So, it's just such a cheap argument to make. That's an argument from incredulity. You're pathetic. No, you're pathetic. And if you're going to talk that way, you can get the fuck out of here, asshole. Make your fucking little weaselly arguments, all right? But make them. You're the one that has the obligation to do so in a manner that's a little bit respectful. Fuckface. All right, bending nothing is illogical. It's nonsensical. There's nothing to bend. Plus, we've already have a logical alternative that fits the math. Yeah, that's right. There are alternative explanations that are well within the rational realm and fit the evidence, and you just don't like those, and that's the truth. You don't want to live in a deterministic, and even in spite of your stupid name, you don't want to live in that world, where we're just byproduct. We're just robots. You want to think we're all magical and God imbued with some sort of magical functions. You just don't like reality. And this is true of most humans. Most humans are pathetically, word for it, abusive of facts, because they do have a wish list. They're selfish bastards, and they're going to force reality to be what they want it to be so they can cheat it. Okay. So this is probably another asshole, Aiden Felly, whatever. Bending nothing is illogical. There's nothing to bend. It's not a straw man. So he calls it a straw man to point out exactly what they are hyping and propagandizing as a theory of reality. They talk about bent space. This is their metaphor for their own theory. It's clearly not a rational metaphor, and that's not our fault. That's your fault for trying to sell it as some notion that it has something to do with fabrics in space. There are no fabrics in space. You have to come up with some other explanation for how your little matrix of space bends and what compels it to bend, how it knows to bend, how it functions to bend. Okay. Plus, we already have the logical alternative that fits the math. Funny how David Murphy asked you to show that it fits the math, and all you did was change and shift the topic. Well, again, what math do I have to fit? So you show me the math I have to fit. Show me, again, some sort of real equation. Now, the Schrodinger equation isn't a real equation, right? Because the wave function is a whole separate mathematical equation. So you show me how you come up with the wave function. So show me how you derive the wave function. If I just say something like, show me the wave function for this battery, and I'll give you no details. You just tell me. Okay? Yeah, what questions do you need to know the answer to figure out what the wave function is? Oh, that's right. It's going to be a whole list of every property the damn thing has. So you're the ones who, lie that your mathematics is somehow working on bent space or some magical probability. There's no magical probability. The only way you can ascertain the probability is you have to almost know everything about the system the thing is functioning in. You frauds. All right. The sad and pathetic thing about scumbags like you is that even when someone demonstrates you are a liar, so again, you didn't demonstrate any such thing. You still continue on with your lies. You are a repugnant, vomit-inducing human being. And we have likewise feelings about you. I mean, you should be fucking goddamn shot right in the head, right there, because your brain is shit. You're the lying scum. You haven't proven your case at all. Your evidence is preposterously weak and indecisive, and yet you're claiming the authority to insult other people's intelligence because they doubt your empty and vacuous explanation. You might as well just call it God space. Why the fuck are you pretending to be anything other than a religious kook? You're dogmatically telling me your Jesus is real and you have absolutely no evidence of its magic powers. You never showed me a video of him walking on water. You haven't shown me one fucking piece of evidence that your fucking Jesus is the son of fucking goddamn anything called a god. I mean, it's terrible evidence. And why are you being such an arrogant ass fuck and telling everybody else they have to believe in your fucking God? It's a fucking God theory. Again, how have I cheated your theory? Explain to me why I should be so fucking compelled to believe that space, three-dimensional space, looks like this. Why the fuck should I believe that? It's stupid. The only rational way to describe it, and the only way, authorities on the subject like Susskind teach it, is to explain, no, there's a spherical object, because spherical symmetry makes this whole thing a lot easier to figure out, and that there's a convergence, okay? Not an anti-divergence, but a convergence heading for the object. So its existence means that there will be a tendency for other objects to move towards it. Now, I've explained how that happens, okay, with a real physical mechanism. They're just saying, well, there's this endless supply of these things, okay, and they go into an endless well inside the center of this object. They just disappear. I've argued that no, they actually are reflecting, and the key ingredient is there's two kinds of them, and that's why there's electrons and protons. Because there's two kinds of the force, and one of the objects does this to the force, and the other object just reflects the force. And that's the difference. But yeah, fuck you. All right, you need to be branded to honestly need someone to show you how convergence equals convergence. It's ridiculously obvious. So I don't know who that's a quote from. That username I don't see. But anyway, clearly, again, playing a game. Why does Susskind say anti-divergence? I mean, isn't that just bullshit talk? He asked you to show that your propositions result in the correct orbital periods and time formulas. Again, you just need the inverse square law for that. There's no other argument, right? Once you have the inverse square law and you understand anything about velocity, there's no missing it. You can't miss the right answer. It's a really small equation to get orbits right. So that's, you're just playing a game here. Like, I have to redo Newton? No, I don't. Okay. And how you're doing exactly what you did there. There is to say it's all obvious, just convergence. It's a convergence by the rules of the inverse square law. The pull, push, gets stronger, proportional to your distance from the object. And there's really nothing else to discuss. It's perfectly acceptable as that's the real factor. And of course, if it is true that the sun's center of gravity is also being moved by the objects that are moving around it, then there would be a procession that could be understood to exist in the sun's location. Its gravitational mass location changes in space, and it's not much of a change, but it's enough of a change to matter to Mercury. So there's nothing Einstein added that's at all interesting if you just understand that all it's really acknowledging is that the sun's precessing. But he's acknowledging it with a formula that has nothing really to do with that explicit truth. It's so convoluted, nobody uses the math, nobody even understood the symbols. He made up new symbols for new functions. But again, all you're really talking about is how much does the sun precess? Its center of mass, not its visual location, but how is the mass, the weight inside the sun moving? The same thing is happening inside the earth, right? No one would say the earth is jiggling in space, but in fact it is. The molten crap inside the earth is not perfectly balanced. It's processing a little because of the moon. Fact, idiot. Deducible fact. Anyway, straw man. Oh, so you deny the MM results. Well, again, I deny that they even understood how the machine works, let alone this theory. And again, it has nothing to do with figuring out whether or not there's no such thing as a time dimension. The MM experiment doesn't do any of that. It's about ether, for fuck's sake, and something called ether drag. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not there's something called not moving. But support an ether version of gravity. That's fascinating. So whose is the ether version? And whose side are you on? I can't even figure out who you quote and then what you put lines through. You have such little comprehension of what you're talking about. It's beyond lunacy. But for the record, I don't and I don't. So, actually, NVM, what I do and don't think has nothing to do with the topic at hand and is irrelevant. So you can go ahead and dispense with your red herrings. I don't even know what all that crap could mean, but whatever. So there's something to bend, then what is it? How is it bent? What is it made of? Is it a pull force? Is it waves? Was the MM experiment wrong? So I guess that's, I don't know, it's partly related to the other. I don't know. So again, I would say even though the MM experiment defeats the ether, which I'm all for, I'm going to argue plainly I don't think. Again, they don't know how an interferometer works. They don't even have a theory of how it works that's sensible, right? Because, you get asked the questions, what happens when I put one photon in? What do you realistically think it does? Oh, it hits both. It goes through the mirror and it reflects off the mirror. It goes through both lengths. And no, it doesn't do any of that horse shit. Okay. And they've never proven it does, right? They've never done the interferometer single photon experiment. All right. Anyway. Gravity is an obvious converging effect. I can show you the exact same thing in simulation, plus it's been demonstrated in lectures as a working model. Well, clearly the idea of mock gravity works, and so, then you only have these other subjects of aberration and drag, and those are also easily explained. They're explained. All the math is a volume of distance, area, exposure relations over time. Well, all the math is a formalization of the variables. That's right. Things are moving. They have mass. They have momentum. They have certain features. And you're just trying to figure out, well, can we write a mathematical equation that defines all of the variables, the things that are moving? And I'm going to argue to you the only thing Einstein's math does is essentially synthesize the precession of the sun. All right. It's convergence and acceleration of mass. What don't you get? Things accelerate towards other things, but they don't do it for no reason. They're pushed. Clearly, it's the mechanism that isn't explained. And when they're pushed, they're absorbing something. The simple theory is. The simple theory is the universe is made of force, little stuff moving the speed of light that has a set momentum. And the simple truth is that there's an object's mass, matter, protons and electrons can get in the way of that force essentially. And that what happens is the force hits that thing and the thing moves. Okay, and by moving, it's absorbed a force that would have hit something over here. So something over here can't be hit by this force because the force is occupied moving an object. So whenever an object's moving, protons and electrons, they are dragged to a halt. They are all that kind of stuff. And so to keep them moving, you have to keep hitting them. Okay, you have to keep hitting them with a force, with a force, with a force. And so then something over here isn't going to get hit by that force. And if it's not getting hit by a force from one side, then the force hitting it on the other side is going to have an advantage and push it into the void. All right. What you don't get is about things accelerating towards other things. It's a mechanism that isn't explained anywhere by anyone aside from here. Yeah, how this is not incredibly obvious to everyone. Again, what doing the bending and how? What's doing the bending and how? So again, that's the job of physics, is to explain how the crime took place, what events followed what events. And you might as well not even have courtrooms anymore or do anything, because you people don't believe in cause and effect. You don't believe that's the obligation, to explain the causes and the effects. You think you can just say, no, there's random. Random did it. So why not just blame everything on that? Just to blame the invisible random man, because he's the one who caused everything. Because there are no mechanical, physical causes. You're just religious kooks. Is there a force involved or not? Well, see, clearly they can't say, and so then they come up with this preposterous idea that the Earth is moving up. It's also moving up, on the opposite side somehow. So, yeah, they're basically turned their expansion theory into absolute nonsense. We don't realize it, but the entire universe is just getting preposterously huge, and that's the force that's, pushing everything into everything, is that the whole universe, every single object in the universe is constantly accelerating in its volume. It's just getting voluminously huge all the time, and that's what's causing it. I mean, it's just shit. Is there any sort of cause and effect? Simple enough question will not be answered. You are predicating all of this on a false dichotomy. So that's another kind of crap language. And as soon as you hear somebody say false dichotomy, you know they're bullshitters. So it's just like the intuition horse shit. You know, what false dichotomy? The expectation that there are causes to effects, that if the effects don't just happen. It's ridiculous. You don't even know how the experiment demonstrates there's no ether. Again, the people who did the experiment didn't understand the experiment, frankly. Your theory of how light is affected, okay, by impediments, your theory is the one I can prove to be irrational. If you think the beam splitter creates two equal beams, if that's your assertion, I can prove with your own theory that your assertion is incorrect. You talk about this secret simple math, yet you can't find it. Geez, it's almost like you don't actually have it. Again, what math do you need besides Newton's equations? They work. They work for a reason. And if you just add a simple fact to Newton's equations, right, the fact that's never put into the equations, the fact that the sun's mass is precessing, okay, so the sun's center of gravity moves. If you put that in, it works. I mean, it works to your higher decimal point level that you seem to require. You don't answer my questions. Is space-time nothing or something? Explain the cause and effect mechanism. So they don't believe in cause and effect. Show me where and how your space-time operates mechanically. Is it magic? See, they're just expecting us not to believe in cause and effect. They say they've somehow proven cause and effect isn't real. That somehow they prove that Heisenberg's bullshit nonsense, that the particle, we can't tell where the particle is. True, we can't tell because we can't see photons. We can't shoot photons at photons to detect their location. That's right, so we can't see them. We can't reflect light off of light. So we can't see them. We'll agree that we can't see them. You say we can't see them because they don't have a location. I say we can't see them because we can't see them, because we actually can't reflect light off of them. But they have a position, they have a location, and all of the experiments demonstrate that you can always go backwards with straight lines, with real locations, and account for the existence of every effect with a cause. You're the one saying, oh, that doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it does mean something. It means you're wrong. Okay. You talk about this simple math. Yeah, gravity acceleration. How is that supposed to be some kind of mystery? How about momentum? Any other secret mysterious math you need which describes what we actually know? Yes, so go ahead and show me you doing Einstein's equations. Show me you doing his equation to predict the precession of Mercury. Show me, because I haven't seen anybody ever actually solve the equation. That is, actually do the equation and point out how this is why, this little extra factor was calculated to be an added velocity imposed on Mercury by the sun moving a little closer to it. Well said. If Superior Mind's understanding was anywhere remotely accurate, then topology and geometry books would be completely empty. Some more nonsense. Again, where is any of, like I said, you're saying that somehow we've debunked Newton or something. No, we haven't. Or all the other rational ways you can get the same answer. It's like the Schrodinger equation, right? There was lots of ways to get the same answer the Schrodinger equation produced. So it's not like you have to have it. It's not some kind of vitally necessary equation. So they're just so full of shit. If I want to find out how charges interact, I can just draw the picture. I can do the math, right? Or I can just draw a picture of two charges. And I can do a very careful drawing and put lines at exactly the same angle, right? And exactly a certain number of lines. And I could just do it even on a piece of little graph paper to make it even more precise. And then I could just sit here and visually measure how big that force is. I can visually measure how big that force is with a ruler, okay? So I can actually do it physically. I can get the right answer. I don't have to do any math at all to get the right answer. Properties, physical terms. Thank you in advance. If space has properties, could you describe these properties in physical terms? Thank you in advance. Yeah, okay, Michael asked that one. It's connected, continuous, three-dimensional. So it's connected. So that's, see, they're making an argument that I think is disprovable. In terms of once you make your ether and make it goop, then you're going to get in big trouble, because then you have all of this friction problem. So they're saying they're ether. See, you could say, I could go along with like some sort of particle ether, and all you're really saying is that this particle that's now matter, okay, pushes out and bangs into a piece of ether glue, and the ether glue goes out and it bangs into another piece of ether glue, and the ether glue keeps banging into the ether glue, and it does the same thing. All right, so it's just a transmission medium. So I could sort of go for that. I just don't think it works, because you can't, the geometry, you end up with square geometry problem. You end up with the fact that the diagonals, okay, this way is going to be a shorter distance than this way. So that's going to get screwed up. You're going to have a diagonal problem in your universe. So it's just, forget about it. You don't need it. You don't need the dominoes. Just flick the one domino, have it go the distance you want it to go, and you don't need all the other dominoes to fall down. It's just superfluous, and in my opinion, it's mathematically impossible to duplicate the universe that we have. You know, that just doesn't have this diagonal problem. Anyway, you're not going to have a consistency to the speed of light if you use your medium. So, but what's worse about their theory, they think these things are all connected. Okay, so somehow if I do move this one, I jiggle this one, and I jiggle this one, and I jiggle this, you know, that somehow all this movement goes through this huge medium. And that would be impossible energy-wise. It makes no sense at all. That's why they don't talk about energy. Because in a medium, you're going to have an insanely bad drag problem. Okay. Let's see, in physical terms. Let's see. Okay. Connected, continuous, three-dimensional. So what does even continuous mean? So it's a giant amoeba space or something? See, they're not even thinking of it like the ocean is continuous. Well, we know the ocean's not continuous. We know it's made of a bunch of molecules. So, you know, so what does that mean, continuous? What? It's not, I mean, even Jell-O, we know it's molecules. Everything's molecules. I mean, you're saying, what is continuous in real physics? There's no continuous substance. Three-dimensional, distinct points have disjoint neighbors, etc., etc. Does that make any sense to anybody? I don't know what that means. Distinct points have disjoint neighbors, etc., etc. Like, everybody's supposed to know what the fuck that means. Those are all real properties with physical implications. Well, I would argue that your connected part is a big physical implication, because then somehow you have to retract all this extra energy. See, you're going to end up having this wave problem. Oh, I moved something this way. One little movement. Well, nothing could go in a straight line, so everything would end up being spread this way and this way. So then you'd end up with these waves that go forever. And then something lands in one location, though. It lands in one place. It doesn't land everywhere. So how do you pull back all this energy? You know, how do you undo the energy it took you to jiggle that Jell-O? Anyway. Let's see, properties, that was that one. Thank you for occupying three dimensions. I can get my head around, but when you say connected, yes, that's a problem. And contiguous, what does space physically consist of to form those connections? Yeah, and what's the implication of those connections? oh, everything goes everywhere, which doesn't make any sense, because that's not what we see. We see photons go in dead straight lines from point A to point B. That's what Feynman will tell you. Certainly Feynman didn't believe in your continuous space. So this is where the inconsistencies are all over the place. They don't even have a real theory. So this guy's arguing one specific kind of physics. You know, whether it be Sean Carrollism or David Greenyism or whatever these idiots are. You know, it's your version. You know, and you don't even tell us what your particular version is. But, you know, Feynman certainly didn't believe in that. Consist of space. Let's see. Space consists of space. Well, that's really helpful. It doesn't need something else to have the property of connectedness. So you're just saying the word space just doesn't mean what it used to mean, which is the opposite of something was the nothing, space. You're saying space is something. Fine. Everybody's saying fine. Okay, you're changed the name of the word. Let's just call it something then. Why are we calling it space? Let's not call it space, but space was always associated with things like empty space, vacuum space. You know, these words that mean nothing, and you're trying to now say, okay, it's not nothing. It's this continuous, solid, connected something. Fine. Now we'll describe what are the implications of your something. How does your something tell nothing what to do? So how does this space push on electrons and protons? Where does it get the energy from to push on them or to pull on them? And if you're pulling this jello, like if every object's pulling jello, you know, sucking it in, where's it going? When it goes down the gravity well, where does the jello go? Anyway. A equals A, law of identity. So again, no, the point is that the word space has clearly been through time associated with nothing. Empty space, vacuum space, equal signs between those words. So that connection is real. You first have to explain that no, you're asserting that space isn't the opposite of the somethings, it's a nothing. You know, it's a something, not a nothing. I think what you're trying to do is some sort of lame equivocation between the word connected and the sense, I don't know, Aiden means and connected, like how a bridge, which has mass, density, and a whole host of other properties, connects two islands. Connected means things are connected, they're touching, they're affecting. Connection is associated with affecting, I guess, sharing. Connected things share something. But clearly connected refers to the fact that matter in space can be brought closer and closer together. Yeah, and why? How does it move in the something space? How does the jello make it move closer to each other? Because both of them are sucking jello, right? Both of them are pulling in jello, and so that's why they move together. I mean, that's how Susskind teaches it. Is Leonard Susskind somebody you think who knows what he's talking about when he talks about bent space? Or not? Let's see. Connected refers to the fact that matter in space can be brought closer and closer together, and you can travel in principle from one point in space to another. So in principle, no, in theory, and it's a silly theory because, again, your idea that I can just turn 3 dimensions into 2, pretend it's a piece of paper and I can just fold it and then poke a hole through it. So how have you realistically theorized about the universe? Oh, well, that's right, you haven't in any way realistically theorized about the real universe. You're saying I can take one thin plane of the jello and I can take a plane of the jello and I can somehow bend it this way and then drill a hole through it. What the fuck are you talking about? It's so silly. All right, to another. It's a property of space. Is that the best you can do? I don't know what that even means. Is that the best you can do? Why are you asking that question? You're asserting something stupid, and then you're saying, is that the best you could do? But clearly, connected refers All right, together. And you can travel in principle from one point in space to another. It's a property of space for which you have zero evidence. Zero. It's a story you've told. Okay? And it doesn't make any sense. Space isn't a bunch of pieces of paper. Is it? Is that what you're saying? That the space is really a big giant folder full of paper, pieces of paper going like this? And that somehow I can take one piece of paper and move it through all the other pieces of paper to fold it over here so I can drill a hole in it? What are you talking about? I mean, your model isn't even in the real three-dimensional universe. Okay. I'm not sure why you assume I'm trying to do anything. I'm merely asking questions and politely as you can plainly see, and any response need not warrant rudeness. Yes, well, I mean, they always, are the first, they take the first shot. If the word connected is in the sense Adam used it, didn't come across as adequately explained. So you're saying Adam before? I don't know what that even means. Then asking further questions seems way to go for clarification. Smiley face. I don't know what the fuck that was about. Alright, so anyway. Oh, this buckyball jackass. I ought to do this one. They haven't hidden God in objects too small to see. Buckyball molecules made up of over 100 atoms display an interference pattern too. So go ahead and link me to it. Because it's not much of a pattern, frankly. It's an incredibly different pattern, frankly. And it's only logical by my own theory, okay? Frankly, yes, buckyballs will bang into electrons and they'll be affected by it because their electron is still a substantial object to a buckyball. It's not a nothing. It's still a something. And again, you haven't explained why isn't the pattern really clear? Why doesn't it make the same pattern? And then you haven't explained, well, buckyballs are big enough to watch. You could shoot photons at buckyballs and you'd still be okay. I mean, you're not going to move it that much. So why don't they do that experiment? Why don't they shoot photons at it and detect which hole it went through? But again, show me the experiment. Because frankly, you haven't even shown me how you launch your buckyballs. You're going to use the same thing that probably you use to launch electrons, which is heat. Heat comes with a whole bunch of extra energy that you're shooting out. So well, anyway. But again, not a good experiment at all. Display any interference pattern too. The basis, and let's understand that the hole they have to shoot the buckyball through then should be infinitesimally small. Smaller than the buckyball, right? Because in theory, the buckyball, the bigger thing you are, the higher your frequency. That is, the smaller your wavelength. And so the slit has to be really, really, really tiny. Okay, anyway. Your bias is what is you want to escape responsibility. So this is the big lie. You're the ones totally escaping responsibility for actually producing some sort of real evidence instead of just keep lying about how it produces the interference pattern. No, it really doesn't produce much of a pattern, frankly. Go ahead, link me to the great pattern it displays. And believing you are made of red and blue arrows is only bounce perpendicular does this thing for you, the same dumb reason. No, the point is it's a much simpler mechanism. Your silly imaginary, there's no real causes, things don't have real positions. The buckyballs don't know where they are and they're completely randomized each time. I've already pointed out that even in the photon multi-slit experiment, you're already done with your random theory because an image goes to the different locations. You can't produce an image with randomization. If I randomize the pixels, you can't produce an image, shithead. You haven't addressed a single point I've raised, and you just keep talking shit. You just keep lying about the strength of your evidence, which another guy does too. Where's the other asshole? I know there's another asshole comment. I mean, it's just sad that there are so many asshole comments. But the nature of the internet, I'm afraid. I read all this? Shit. So maybe it's this thread of shit. Yeah, Skyram guy. What an asshole. Anyway, I'll just do part of this one. If you have one slit, constructive split, he said. If you have one split, constructive and destructive interference is observed when the slit is wider than the wavelength of the light. All right, so this one's already been demonstrated 400 times. I've played the video. So Professor Lewin does a video where he just makes the slit smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, right? There's always a pattern. So this has nothing to do with the wavelength of the light. Okay? Nothing. Zero. Okay? It happens, the phenomena isn't dependent on that. Now their math is, because in the double slit, you have to assume the width of the slits because they're not in the math. Because you're using the dimensions of the impediment to decide for the distance piece of the equation, the distance between two slits. Anyway, so right there, this is just so dishonest to imply that somehow that's a fact, that the wavelength of the light is critical. It isn't. The pattern exists no matter what the distance is. It's just you can't see it if the slit's really wide because it's happening on the surfaces, and the surfaces are a tiny percentage of the photon, so it gets totally drowned out. But it's always there. All right. When the slit is, when the slit is wider than the wavelength of the light. Just buy a laser. Yeah, I've already done the experiment. I mean, I've shown it in maybe 100 videos at least on this channel. An appropriate slit and test for yourself. This also applies to electron. Here's the evidence. Oh, so this was pretty funny. So I'll just go to this. So this is a silly experiment. I mean, mechanically just silly. So they're using a printed circuit board and, have 4 different circuits. And the idea is they're going to shoot electrons on a printed circuit board, okay, out of an opening in metal, and then put it across a magnetic to another little piece of thing that's supposed to be creating magnetism, right? This is all on a little tiny circuit board, right? And they're going to tell me, so they not only have an electron emitter, they have an electron detector, okay, built into a circuit board. I mean, oh yeah, that sounds realistic. So anyway, here's the results, right? And so the blue lines here are the actual what's observed versus their theory. I mean, obviously not close. I mean, realistically, not close. I mean, it's going off the chart here even to start. I mean, not close. So, so this is more just the hype. Oh, yeah, we proved it with this really not really convincing argument. It's so annoying. This is pathetic liars. The diffraction pattern can be seen in the figures. No, you can see just how. What do you mean the diffraction pattern? I thought we were talking about interference, idiot. So again, try to explain that with your particles collide against the sides of the slit. So this is a lie right here, right? Particles collide against the sides of the slit. It's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying the sides of every object on Earth, every object has electrons on its surface. Free electrons. Charge electrons, you can argue. Everything does. Okay? A certain number of them, a certain distance apart. And that's what bends light in refraction. And that's also what can bend light when light travels along the side of an object. It also happens, asshole. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't need to bang into the surface. Because there is no fucking surface. They're atoms, jackass. Have you heard of atoms? Atoms are 99.99% empty space. Have you ever heard of that, fuckhead? There is no surface, jackass. There's electrons, fuckface. Okay. Theory. Once you have done that, try to apply it to the double slit. Yeah, well, why don't you just show me how the double slit matches the math? Why don't you show me how the double slit experiment is, the pattern is gradually on and gradually off. And this is what the math predicts. Okay? This is what you see. Okay, so why don't you explain why the math isn't anything like what you see? This is what you see. This is what your math predicts. Why is your math wrong? Okay, once you have done that, try to apply it to the double slit. Spoiler alert, it won't work, but you can keep denying the evidence. So they just say, I'm denying evidence when they're the ones hyping evidence that's not true. Like the detector experiments they never did. Like not explaining how images are projected. Why don't you give me your theory of how images are projected when there's multiple slits or a diffraction gradient? Why don't you explain why images are transmitted? And how those images are transmitted through randomness. It doesn't matter where the photon goes through the slit. It doesn't matter whether it goes near the edge or right in the middle. It doesn't matter. Same probability to end up in magic space. Well, why don't you explain how that produces an image? Evidence and pretend that every physicist is biased. Well, you're all full of shit is what you are. It's a religion. So what are you going to say? Yeah, you have a religion. You believe it, and you think everybody should believe it because Jesus is really cool and Muhammad is a stinkhead. And that's all you're doing here. That's all I see, because you're not drowning me in evidence. Good evidence. Yeah, you're drowning me in crappy links to a crappy paper with a crappy theory. You think they can emit electrons, receive electrons, and magnetize and do magnetic effects on a printed circuit board. Fuck you. Anyway, bias, which you have no argument for. Well, again, I do have plenty of arguments. Humans tend to prefer intuitive explanations, so more of this intuitive crap. You know, decent humans with rational reasoning skills do not believe fairy tales. They don't just sit there and listen to somebody tell some wacky story. They say, show me. And every time I say, show me, you assholes don't show shit. Okay, and that's not only includes raging lunatics like you. Yeah, well, fuck you. You're a little pussy shit sky ram jackass living in your fantasy fake universes. Okay, in your fake phony world of your fake random events and your fake perception that the universe is doing all this wacky fun stuff. Oh, and it just happens to be that all the gremlins live in the little magic world that's too small to see. But yes, it's a gremlin universe. Ugh, fuck you idiots. Alright, we won't bother with the banter between them. You know, let's see. Can you describe other one? The state of an electron using a wave function. One can describe using a... There's no... Again, so they keep saying this word wave function. Wave function is a description of everything we know about the thing. Okay? It's not some little function that just... You just say, give me a wave function, please. Oh, it's a 5. No. No such thing, asshole. So in that sense, they are waves. So again, he keeps saying this. The soldiers are soldiers. I'm just frankly saying, you know, and they can keep pretending that the soldiers are a wave, but they're not. Just as if I fire a gun, you know, and I sequentially shoot some bullets, the bullets aren't waving. All right. The amplitude would be the absolute value of the assigned wave. The wave function again. So again, this more nonsense. So we've already been over the vector crap. So, you know, they don't pay any attention to the argument. Let's see. Here we go. How does a photon or electron interfere with itself when it's one at a time? The self-interference can be quantitatively described with Huygens principle. So again, the magical infinity principle. Yes, we believe in infinity. We're physicists. We say there can be an infinite amount of something in this space. This space is infinitely big. Oh, God. So their own principles are ludicrous. Once you accept wave nature of electrons, why would I accept the wave nature when every single experiment demonstrates an electron to be a quanta of stuff? All right. So just now just resorting to Wikipedia pages. So anyway, no point. No point at all. Again, our theory explains why the single photon experiment works is because, yes, the universe is made out of single soldiers, and single soldiers go to different locations. Each soldier, one goes to Munich, one goes to Heisenberg, one goes to whatever. They all go to different places. Let's see, composed of electrons. Oh, fuck it. We've already been over this stuff so many times. So, till the next time and such, and whatever. Fuck you people. Idiots. Planet is just covered with belligerently stupid fucks. Again, you're just being belligerent when you can't admit the simple truth. You just don't have enough evidence. And alternative theories do explain the phenomenon. No one is obligated to believe in your bent space Jeebus and in your Heisenberg Mohammed. No obligation.